Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the new year. Welcome to the new crap show that is our lives right now. I feel like I'm in a big blanket just to feel like a little bit more comforted with everything that's going on. And I've been staying up late watching the news and reading Blue Sky. So, we're going to bring an important guest today. Dr. Kim Williams is joining us, and we're going to be talking about all things science and politics and advocacy and what's science supposed to be for. And it does kind of cross into academic misfits. A lot of people who do things that are out of the scope of what people think academics should be doing. I think that we get a lot of flack for things that branch into advocating for our communities, doing the outreach and the grassroots movements that we really want to be doing, some of us. So that's the conversation that I'm going to be having today. I'm your host, Luna Munoz, the ultimate misfit, I suppose. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started and get this rocking. Here we are, Kim. Welcome.
Hey, I'm so excited. Like I'm really honored to be on. I feel like I've been watching these as like a member of, your coaching programs for a few, like more than a year now. And so like look at me. Yay.
Look at you. You're here. And I am definitely honored because as soon as I met you, I don't know if you remember when we met, we just spoke forever, and I just
Yeah,
realized how much we had in common, that we really,
me too.
yeah, we just clicked. And this is the best
Yeah.
reason why I have my business and why I do this podcast, because I love meeting people and I love meeting badass women, and you're just like top list right there.
Oh, cheers. Back at you. Back at you. Seriously, you're one of my, like, I follow you on LinkedIn all the time. Like, when I ever, your posts are amazing. Like, I just feel often that you're just, it's like, wait, is Luna in my head? What's happening? It's just so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm so glad I found it's so hard to find fellow misfits in academia, actually. Like people
It
who
really is. Yeah.
you just connect with. And I think this has
Yeah.
made me feel a lot less alone. So it's been mutual. Do you know what I mean? Just mutual healing.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm still in, which I imagine we'll probably talk about. But you're like kind of, what are you like on year 3 or 4 out at this point,
Yeah.
and kind of making it happen for yourself, which is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, and it was for 2021 January. So it's been 4 years since I got the letter saying you're up for redundancy. And along with think it was 80 people. And I had been a rep in the union. I had studied the Equalities Act. I
Yeah.
knew all the
All the
background.
things. Yeah.
Like if you read Sarah Ahmed, right? And she's like, the people
Hmm.
who are subject to these policies know them inside and out, and the people who are like weaponizing them do not know them. Like, and from then on, I was like, and as I was in the union and writing speeches like every week, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be employable anymore. So this is this is the start of something new because I'm no longer employable. I just feel it in my bones.
Yeah, no, it's
um,
true. I totally understand that for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I have some thoughts about that, and I mean, it's so fascinating because I'm just thinking of my own resume. Because you and I, like, you've been working with me, I've been working with you to learn about sort of transferable skills and trying to figure out um, what does it look like to take me out of being a gender and sexuality studies professor, and I have an answer to that question now, which I did not 4 or 5 years ago.
mm,
um, and so I look at my own resume though, and I'm like, and I think I've said this to you, like, there's no way I'd still be in the academy if I weren't exactly who I am in the academy, which is a gender sexuality studies professor, because it is like legit part of my job. Like, people expect me to be a cranky feminist killjoy, right? Like, That's literally my job. And so they, yeah, I'm a misfit, and people roll their eyes, but they're like, oh, she's of course that's how she is, right?
Exactly.
Because I mean, I just think of like, I worked at Planned Parenthood before I joined, the academy, and I worked at the ACLU. I mean,
Yeah.
like, my and I'm not taking that stuff off. So, um,
Yeah, tell
I
us
don't
more
know.
about that because I think I knew about the Planned Parenthood. I'm not sure if I knew about the ACLU, but I
Yeah,
also now, as I'm starting to build a portfolio, because I was like, I feel like I am going back to the idea that I'm just like, well, I can just do some coaching, and I have this podcast, but I don't really do anything, and I started to get like a lack of confidence again.
yeah,
And, oh, wait, do you have something like squeaking?
yeah. It's all right. It's just my partner. They would like to talk to me about whatever it is that's happening, and I'm just like, no, I'm focused.
um, and so one of the first things that I realized that I've done in my life was I worked for National Audubon Society. And I was doing fundraising, which is what I do for a
Yeah.
lot of companies now, or like
Cool.
organizations now,
Yeah.
nonprofit, is
Right.
help them with fundraising in a different way than when I was 17
Yeah.
and I was just calling people up and being like, "Hey, your tuna is dolphin free now. Like that's really cool, but do you know that it's not shark free and like sharks are endangered too?" And most people
Yeah.
were like, "I don't freaking care about sharks." But it really taught me like how we talk about things, articulate issues to people,
Mhm.
which was
Mhm.
really important. But yeah, tell me about how, like,
Yeah.
did you do your PhD after you did those roles? And
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah.
okay, and like,
And
how'd
I'll
you
tell you,
do a
like,
PhD? Like, why'd you decide to do a PhD?
oh my gosh, gosh. Okay, so the very short version is that I was working at this place that's now called the Dorcas International Institute of
Mm.
Rhode Island, um, in Providence. And they were and continue to be sort of the um, first stop immigrant and refugee resettlement agency in Rhode Island. Um, one of two major ones. The other one's in Boston,
Mm.
for like the New England area. Anyway, so I'm working there, and I already had a master's degree. I had gone to the University of Toronto to get an MA in history, and I was like, "Fuck that!" Ooh, am I allowed to use the F word? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'll mark it as explicit. We're
Uh,
misfits
so I was
that way
like,
as well, just total misfits.
yeah. Anyway, and so yeah, so I had come back from Toronto, back home, and I was like, oh, got to pay my bills. So I got this job in development and communications. So I was like officially the development and communications assistant, and then I got promoted to associate, in the next year or whatever it was. Well, this was it was the fall. So I was teaching at the university that I actually went to undergrad at up the road because I didn't make enough money at my nonprofit job. So I was kind of doing two things, right? So I had like a sessional like contract job at the university, just teaching introduction to women's and gender studies, or it was women's studies at the time,
Mm.
and then also working full time at this sort of development communications job. And so my job at the International Institute was to do some grant writing, research, all that sort of stuff. Right.
Wow.
My main job was donor relations. That was like legit. I would, get the check from the donors in the mail, log it. I was in charge of the donor software, send the thank you letter. That was literally my job. Lots of work with the board of directors, annual meetings, all that sort of fundraising, nonprofit
Wow.
stuff. And then also part of my job was communications because we didn't have a separate like marketing relations, public relations, communications space. It was like all in the office that I shared with my boss, who was the director.
Wow.
Yeah, it was super cool. She's the best boss I've ever had, and so competent, so kind, so passionate, so much experience around all sorts of issues that we all care about. Anyway, and so yeah, so I was doing communications, and I had worked there for um, like I was in charge of putting together like the press packets, if something was happening, it would be like, send out this press release. I would write it. I was in charge of the newsletter. And of course, this was all before like we didn't have an email newsletter. No, it was hard copy, right? So I'm like designing these newsletters anyway. And this was the same sort of job I had at Planned Parenthood, which I worked at before, more the communications piece. I didn't do any development or fundraising at Planned Parenthood. But anyway, so yeah, so I had worked there about a year when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
And so I was literally the person, capital T, capital P, that very angry people were calling and saying, "Why are you supporting terrorists?"
Oh my gosh.
Like, okay. So,
They have to be angry at somebody, right? And like,
yeah, right? Like, holy crap. Okay. Um, anyway, and also I was teaching at the university at the time as well, right? Um, so like I had to answer these questions, and my boss, whose name was Pam, she and I, also a white cis woman, she and I were like, all right, well, how are we going to answer this? And it was something around like we just had like a 2 or 3 sentence, like, here's the statistics from the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees. Here's the statistics on like who are the refugees and immigrants in Rhode Island. Here's what we do to support them, all the refugee resettlement stuff. Like, it was just like a 2 sentence sort of spiel that we never knew we were going to need.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
like ridiculous. Particularly, the details are unimportant, but particularly because at that time, and I don't know if this has changed because obviously it's been a really long time since I've lived in Rhode Island, but at that time, very few immigrants or refugees from MENA at all.
Yeah.
Lots of folks from South and Central America, lots of folks, believe it or not, from like Southeast Africa, and some Southeast Asia, a lot of Hmong folks, but like not from MENA at all, right?
No.
Or South Asia. But in any
No.
case, so people were just,
Yeah. I mean,
people were just racist and xenophobic, as they are now. Anyway,
the UK race riots this summer, same freaking shit.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this was 2001, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but at the same time, I was also teaching at the university, and so that morning, the morning of 9/11, I was in class when the planes hit the World Trade Center. And I had already started teaching. We started at 9, right? And the planes hit at 9/11. And so I'm teaching and I'm doing my thing. So a couple of students were late, and I noted that they were late, but I mean, they're adults, they do what they got to do. Well, then they came in. I don't know, maybe 9:30, 9:40. They came in, and one of them clearly had been crying. And I said, what has happened? And they were like, oh my gosh, like, planes have hit the World Trade Center. I think my sister was a flight attendant on one of them. I think she was on duty. Because keep in mind the proximity to Boston, right? And one of the planes had come from Boston. So she didn't know if her sister was working that flight or not. And as it turned out, she was. So I had a student in my class whose sister was on flight, whatever it was, from Boston. And so obviously, so then fast forward, to the next week, I didn't know where Afghanistan was.
No.
I'm teaching this class. I don't know. How old was I? 23, 24?
Right.
Just out of my master's. I didn't know where Afghanistan was, Luna. So I was like, oh shit. Right. So I'm basically staying like a lesson ahead of my students, trying to do this global context that back in 2001, women's studies the field has evolved so much since then to include that transnational piece, to include the decolonial piece, to include, so much, right? But I mean, 30 years ago, because that's really what we're talking about, 25 years ago, it was just not there yet. And so I was teaching this course, Introduction to Women's Studies, where, we were still back on body image and
Right.
Not that we've solved that, not that we've solved that problem, but
No.
like that's what we were talking about, Anyway, yeah, and so I was really, and I think I was also teaching a course that it was unfortunately named Western Civ at the time
Oh,
too.
wow. Okay.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They've changed it, thank goodness. But yeah, it was called Western Civ at the time. So anyway, so that's kind of why I went back to school, because I was like, all right, I don't know enough about anything.
Ah,
So I have to go and figure out, why are people hating on immigrants and refugees? I mean, I could kind of figure it out, but like, and why don't I know where Afghanistan is? You know, and
or why
why
do I know it now? Do you know what I mean?
and why do I know it now?
Like, why do I
Yeah.
know where Kuwait is? Do you know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
grew up in the
Yeah.
90s, yeah, anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. And what is going on with the US that they want to bomb the crap out of everybody all the time? Like I had so many questions. And so I was like,
Oh,
and
I
so why
wasn't.
women's
It's really interesting. I'm sorry to like interrupt
no.
you, but when 9/11 happened, I was in Penn State University. I just
Yeah.
started my PhD, and I went to my criminology class that day. So I was seeing it from a perspective of like,
Yeah.
because I was very much interested in how people deal with aggression. Like, when does rehabilitation, retribution come into, like,
Right.
why would the US go straight to retribution? Like, that's going to make you look really bad, just in terms of the optics, you know what I mean? And
Yeah. Yeah.
your reputation in the world, you know, and just like, because you have to think about that. Like, people are doing that when they're a bully at school, right? They're thinking
Yeah.
about like their
Yeah.
status, their what they get out of it, like even subconsciously. But yeah, so it's really interesting that you were thinking about it from that perspective. But I was like, criminology, like, why would you
Yeah.
do that? And there's so many other things that you could decide to react with than
Yeah.
bombs, But anyway, go ahead. That's so
No,
interesting.
no, you're totally right. And of course, then and doing the sort of gender and sexuality studies program that I did, which it was at the University of Maryland, and at the time it was called Women's Studies. Um, I learned about so many amazing things that literally the world started to make sense, as I was like, oh, that's why. Oh, that. And of course, one of the things that I learned, because I ended up doing like my sort of major fields and like my dissertation and everything was all about US foreign policy and US nationalism, American nationalism, and sort of the gendered racialized dynamics of that. And of course, like one of the major things that feminist international relations scholars talk about, is the fact that the US just operates as a violent partner in a domestic violence relationship, right? It's like we've all survived. We're all all like got Stockholm syndrome. Um, and I don't live in the US anymore, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. But like we've all got Stockholm syndrome, and we're all like, yeah, we don't, and so these guys that are like in charge of things, and some women as well, cis women, these guys are in charge of things, like they just are like revengeful, nasty, toxic
Yeah.
human beings who have survived, I'm sure, their own trauma, but there's no cause to take it out on other people. That's uncool, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think we both came to the same perspective, because the guy that I
Yeah.
was working with was very much around, he studied domestic violence, and he studied
Yeah.
like, why, like, yeah, why are these people going to violence in that way? And even doesn't even
Yeah.
have to be physical, but like coercive control and everything like that, which, yeah, the US has a good handle on as well in terms.
They know how to do that real good. Yeah. 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 It's funny. We're both like born well, in the US ish. I mean, Puerto Rico notwithstanding. Hey, Puerto Rico.
But I was born in almost Vermont.
Yeah.
So I was born in the Northeast.
Yeah.
I say
And now
almost
down.
Vermont
And,
because, yeah, the closest hospital was not in Vermont anyway.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, both of us even from
Yeah.
New England, right? In that way. So yeah, and now not living there anymore, and sort of watching the horror unfold, from a
Mm.
distance. and I don't know about you in the UK, but here in Canada, if I hear one more fucking person say, "Oh, thank God I don't live in the US," I'm just like, look around you.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Do you mean that these things are not like that? There's no freaking exceptionalism here either, like wherever you are and wherever I
Yeah,
am? Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's
You know,
so
I,
aggravating.
I'm just like, oh yeah, because there's no racism or poverty or sexism or trans antagonism here either. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
J.K. Rowling doesn't freaking live here. Oh, yeah. No. What the hell?
Come on.
We have homegrown and
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, I literally said to somebody the other day who said that to me, actually, it was one of my students. I said, look, that is a low bar, okay? I said, that's like Vermont saying, thank God we're not like Mississippi, okay? That is a low ass bar. Don't even.
You know what I think it is though? I think it's marketing. I think the
Yeah.
US has marketed themselves, the American dream. You can accomplish anything as long as you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's similar, I feel like, to academia. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I remember being like, no, it's fine. Like, I'm going to rise out of poverty because as soon as I get a PhD, like, as long as I have a brain, like I could be
Mhm.
injured, I could like break my legs, I could, be in a wheelchair, but
Yeah.
as long as I have my brain, I will always have a job and that way I won't be in poverty. But like the reality is
Yeah.
like
Well,
hardly.
that's it. Yeah. I mean, my parents, are my mom is by training a registered nurse, and my dad was by training an accountant. And both super smart folks who could have done so much and couldn't because they didn't have the money to go to university, right? Like I remember both of my parents at university when I was very young. Um, I remember going to classes with my mom. I remember watching her dissect a cat when I was like 7 or 8 years old, as part of her nursing program. And I remember my dad being in school as well. But like they couldn't understand when I finished my PhD. They were like, I don't understand why you're having such a hard time finding a job. I don't understand. And then when I was so unhappy here, and of course this is year 16 of I call it exile here in Alberta. Here in Alberta, they were always like, well, why can't you find another job? Why you have a PhD? Why can't you find another job? Like, surely you could come home. Why do you have to? Can't you come home and work? Like, why do you have to go all the way to Alberta? So like you have a PhD, they like piled higher and deeper, right? Like they just didn't. And of course I didn't know either. Like I had
Yeah.
no clue. I just went to graduate school because I was like, I need to know more things about all these things. And that seemed to be the next step. I didn't go because I wanted to be a professor. I didn't go because I wanted to write books.
Yeah.
I didn't go because I knew what the hell I was getting into. I was just like, I need to know more things so I can do my job better. Like I don't know.
Oh,
It's
that's
just
such a
stupid.
nice like reason to go. Like I just want to know all these
I just want to
things.
know more things.
And I want to
Yeah.
be, I mean, like, what would you do with that knowledge? What is your, like, somebody's saying something about you at your retirement party or, like,
Mm.
yeah. And we were talking about our deathbeds last night at one of the parties that I went to. Like, like, what is that being able to know all those things? What does that help you do? I feel
Change
like
the
I'm getting
world.
into coaching mode, but anyway.
Yeah, no, change like I think I had it in my head. I mean, I like my, again, since graduating from college, I mean, even when I was in high school, I volunteered as an escort at Planned Parenthood,
Mm.
you know, um, and so I feel like my really for such a long time, I've been in community, working for gender equity, working for racial justice. Like I just feel like for a really long time, I've been doing that work. Um, I feel like ever since I kind of knew it was necessary. I mean, I organized the walkout. Speaking of Kuwait, I organized the walkout against the imperialist U.S. war in Iraq in 1991. Right? I mean,
Wow.
so I feel
Yes.
like my whole and then like I graduated from college. I went to work at Planned Parenthood, and then I went to graduate school for like a hot second, and then came back and was working like at the ACLU and Dorcas, this place I was telling you about. And it was only really after that that I went back to graduate school. So, like, I just and of course I chose gender, women's sexuality studies precisely because it combines the activism that I need to do, that I was already embedded in doing. That's partly why I didn't go to history. I had University of Toronto. I was in history, and I just it didn't. They wouldn't let me do my social justice
Mm.
stuff, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah, and so that's why I'm like, I would not still be in the academy if I weren't exactly the kind of professor I am, to teach the courses I teach, to do the work I do on campus, right? Because I mean, it's organizational change, it's social justice work all the time,
Yeah.
and yeah, so yeah, I think like I needed to know more things so I could change the world.
Yeah.
Like it felt. I mean, it was the '90s, right?
Yes.
Like it felt so possible,
Yes.
and the early 2000s, like it felt so possible. um
Yes.
and then of course now I have this interdisciplinary degree that like nobody, you know
Yeah.
like Karen Kelsky just wrote, like there was a whole recent blog post. I don't know if she wrote it or I think somebody else wrote
From
it
the professor is
from her
in.
site.
Yeah, the professor is
Yeah,
out.
yeah, about like the futility of interdisciplinary degrees at this point, and I've seen it happen. Like literally, I had just got offered my job that I have now when a colleague of mine that was at the same postdoc I was at, whose degree was in history,
Mm.
was offered a women's and gender studies job at a Research One university because she could be cross appointed in history, and the historians didn't want a WGST PhD; they wanted a historian,
Wow.
right? So I have a PhD in the field, and I'm stuck up here in this fourth rate dumpster fire with only a minor, and she's at a Research One with a PhD program in gender sexuality studies.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I mean, yeah, I totally get what you mean, though. I mean, like one of the first classes I took when I went to Stony Brook was gay in the 90s. Like there was a class called Gay in the 90s. I took that.
Yeah.
I took Resistance in Latin American Cinema. I was like, yes, absolutely loved all the documentaries that are just
Oh,
like,
I bet.
fuck the US and you meddling in all of our shit, and I was just like,
Yeah.
yes, and yeah, we were like, yeah, it's interesting. And most of the stuff I did was volunteer at like girls, group homes, girls that,
Yeah.
were, yeah, pretty much neglected by the state, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think like, but I mean, so yeah, my PhD, one of the things I wanted to do with it, and it's never changed. Like I read why I did a PhD back, like I wrote about it back in in 2001 or two or something like that, about like why I wanted to do this PhD. Because I was blocked from doing it at Penn State, and I was like, I need to write about like what I'm trying to do and actually give myself like confidence that I should keep going. But it was really about like applied psychology, which I was talking to somebody and he was like, I'm calling myself an applied social scientist. He's from Chile, also has that resistance spirit in the UK. And he said, I'm going to call myself a applied social scientist. He's like, you know why? Because applied is always lesser than. You have applied physics,
Yeah.
or you have like,
Or you
the
have theoretical physics, but you don't need the adjective for theoretical physics, right? Yeah.
exactly. So, and so it was really interesting because that is the part that has the impact. That's the part that's
Yeah.
trying to change the world. That's why I did applied psychology. I mean, like, but then you hear from other people saying, well, science should be, objective or unbiased, and you need the analytical, logical mind that only men can
Yeah.
have, and women are too
Mhm.
emotional. Um, or like your science is too emotional, or you're getting too involved because you work with the communities, so you have a vested interest in their doing well. So how can you do the science in that objective way, Kim? Have you had things
Well,
like that, or how do
yes,
you?
of course, of course. And of course, the answer is you can't, Luna, because it doesn't exist. Objectivity, right? I mean, gosh, I just feel like we keep, like just this conversation, like, oh, I can't. Okay, so where's my, can I get up and get something off my bookshelf? Do you mind?
Yeah,
Because you can edit this, right? You can edit
absolutely.
this.
I can edit it
Okay,
later.
hang on.
I'll write down the timestamp.
So, yeah, obviously,
Or maybe I'll just leave
I'm
it
gonna
in.
listen. Yeah, I'll come back.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to whatever Dr. Fauci tells me to do. Okay, let me say that first and foremost. Now, I want to find to answer your question. I should have done this earlier when we were sort of talking about what we might talk about. But one of the things that always has to happen is when I do the work, right? Um, and I am not the only one to whom this happens. It happens to critical race scholars, it happens to feminist scholars, it happens to, to indigenous scholars. As you say, right? Anybody who's doing kind of community-based work that will help the community. So literally, I mean, and frankly, I why the fuck would you do anything if it's not going to help somebody? But that's just me. Anyway,
Because
so
you want to
this
have a
is
cigar and like sit in your
I
chair and
mean,
have
you
like
can't.
the
I
patches
can't.
on the elbows.
Seriously. But anyway, no, I'm not, I promise I'm not plugging. I don't care, right? But this is my book. I'm so proud of my book. It was published, where is it? There it is. It was
Stampede.
published in 2021. It's like seriously the book of my rage, okay? And so on page 6 of this book, oh, and I should say, speaking of academic misfits, the introduction is literally called "What the fuck." Okay, right there it is.
It's amazing.
It's right there. There it is. It's called "What the fuck." Okay,
That's true
because
academic quality right there.
okay. Anyway, and so and I wrote this book to get promoted to full, and now I will never have to write another book in my whole fucking life. Okay, but anyway, so literally in this book I wrote, to ask feminist questions means that I realize, despite being an expert in my field of women's and gender studies, that there are a great many things I don't know, and as such, there are always more questions to ask. Um, it is freely and humbly to acknowledge that my research is always inherently partial. And by partial, I mean both incomplete and politically and ideologically valenced, the opposite of impartial. Indeed, as critical scholars such as Hartsock and Haraway have pointed out for some decades now, this is always the case for all researchers, not just those of us who explicitly study and critique power structures, their institutional hierarchies, and their resultant systemic identity-based oppression of particular groups of people. Because despite what some scholars may have you believe, there is no such thing as disembodied objectivity. Humans are humans, and none of us can ever be impartial, neutral, or unbiased, because none of us, not one single person, is ever able to avoid being influenced by and taking on the beliefs of the structures and systems within which we were raised and continue to live and work. This inevitably is often indiscernible, even to ourselves, and it drives the research questions in which we are interested or even able to ask in the first place.
Woo!
Literally,
Wepa!
page 6. Page 6.
Amen.
And so don't even come at me. And I
Ah.
and I and here's my confession. I'm a cultural studies scholar, right? So my evidence or my research includes watching episodes of The West Wing. Okay, that's my research. My evidence is, see minute 13.17 of In the Shadow of Two Gunmen from season 3. Okay, that's right. That's my citation. But like, I just like, don't even come at me with you're not objective because you care too much,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my God. It's so freaking aggravating because it's like, I read, I don't know if you know the book Presumed Incompetent, but yeah,
Yeah.
right? And it has like,
Hmm.
stories by, chapters by a lot of people, but one of them was like a Latin American woman who was told like, well, you can't study like Hispanic studies, like what it was called back then, because like you're too close to it. Do you know what I mean? And there's just this
Yeah.
like also hierarchy
Yeah.
of knowledge as well. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, that this
Hmm.
knowledge that you get from books is better than the West
Yeah.
Wing, or this book, this knowledge that
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
from this place is better than oral histories or people's lived
Yeah.
experiences.
Exactly.
So yeah, I
Exactly.
think it's
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I feel like in your experience, like the work that you do is already of the misfit quality. And so that's why I was really excited to hear your perspective. But also, I've been reading a book. I don't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up later. But about how gay people used to be called sexual psychopaths, because my
Uh-huh.
field of study was psychopathy,
Sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, I want to tear it all down. Like, me and my friend are all like, we should tear down that whole fucking shit because there's so much wrong with that as well. Because
Yeah.
that was created from studying criminals in like white male prisoners
Yeah.
in Canada, like
Uh-huh.
the guy from UBC, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like all of this. And then, yeah, I could go on forever. But, when I started
Hmm.
reading about that, I mean, that's been since like the 1940s, 50s. So the American Psychiatric Association has not been, doing good things either. And that's been run by white men,
No. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I
Well, I
think
mean,
you're
and
right. There's just like, there's not, you can't, I love your idea, the partial. Like, that was amazing. I don't know, like, where you got that from, but
cheers.
I
Well,
absolutely love that.
that's actually, I'm going to give props. That's actually my colleague here at Mount Royal. She's a historian. Her name is Carmen Nielsen, and so I've cited her here
That's
because
amazing.
so, because feminist scholars, we have to spend so much time. Literally, there's 4 pages of this book in the introduction dedicated to why my questions matter and why the research. Why you shouldn't diss the research just because it's coming out of a feminist perspective,
So,
because we have to spend so much time.
did an editor tell you to put that in, or were you like, well, I obviously have to start my chapter this way, like my book this way?
I did it. I did it myself. Yeah, my editor was awesome actually. But like they did exactly what I asked them to do. So this press that published this book is not an academic press. It's like it's Canada. It's called Fernwood Publishers, and it's like Canada's Beacon Press. So Beacon publishes all of Bell Hook's stuff, right, in the
Wow.
U.S. And so I wanted Fernwood, and I went after them hard, and I was so excited when they accepted it. But that's also another, I think, privilege of kind of being where I'm at, if I'm really kind of
Mm.
self-reflexive about it, even though it's been a time. But like, I wouldn't have been able to publish with Fernwood if I was like at the Research One university that my friend got the job at, because
Yeah.
they wouldn't. It would have had to have been a university press for me to get promoted. So there's that, right? The sort of standards are slightly, and plus I made that argument in my tenure or in my promotion binder, like about why I did this,
Mm.
and it was explicit and specific. So no, I intentionally added those bits about objectivity and impartiality, because I also needed, there's a little section before the part I read you where I talk about, and this is actually kind of ironic because of course as we're discussing like the critiques of being too close to community to be objective, one of the critiques that I heard a lot when folks learned I was writing this book researching it. This book took me 10 years to research.
Mm.
Um, and it was
Wow.
part of my learning. Yeah, it was like part of my learning curve of being here in Alberta. Um, and and so one of the critiques that was levied against me was, well, you're not from here. Why, you're not of us? You don't have any business writing about this event, which so it's called the Calgary Stampede, right? You don't have any business writing about this event that is so important to us and such a touchstone of our city's culture, of our province's culture, because you're not of us. You weren't born here. You know, you can't possibly understand all the nuances and look at them with an objective perspective, you know, all this stuff. So like I was critiqued for not being close enough, but then
Oh.
also had to defend being too close. Like, oh well, of course you're going to critique the Stampede for being sexist. You're a woman. You're a feminist scholar, right? Of course, you know. Yeah. So I put it in because I needed to tackle head on. Like, this is why I actually am a really great person to do this work. Because I actually am not of community, but yet I am, because I am a white person. I'm a white settler many times over at this point. And so for me to look at this event, um, I'm very much, I very much benefit from white supremacy,
Mm.
which is very like that's the culture of the Stampede, right?
Mm.
But I can also see the sexism, the homophobia, the misogyny, the anti-indigenous racism. Like, so let's have a conversation. So yeah, so I had to tackle some of that head on. So
Yes.
I decided to put it in. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you also because I know that you're doing other applied work. So I know that you work with nonprofit organizations.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, like, how were you in academia kind of doing your thing of like, I'm going to study, I'm going to cite things, I'm going to, play the game and do all the things I need to do to get, tenure, whatever it is. And then you were like, I want to go back to my nonprofit roots, or like, yeah, did you leave that for a
Yeah.
while? And yeah, tell me now about like what's making you
Yeah.
feel fulfilled in your life in terms of that
Yeah.
changing things.
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. Yeah, and so um it was, I think the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that I just felt like I got bad advice. It would have been good advice for someone else maybe, but I got a little bad advice from one of my profs when I was at grad school at University of Maryland. Um, and of course, I'm in Washington D.C. Basically.
Mm.
College Park is like 6 miles east of Washington D.C. So I lived in the D.C. metro area for 7 years.
Mm.
And during the first Bush administration.
Mm.
And there was so much to do that I wanted to be doing. But she said to me, when I was 22, 23, 20, I don't even know how old I was when I went to grad school. Fall of 2020, 2002 is when I started.
22.
It's 2002. And so she said to me, because I was talking to her at this point, saying, look, there's so much so many classes, so much reading. So I have to pay, I was on full tuition, but it's DC. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. I had
Yeah.
to work, like all this stuff. Okay. I had like 4 jobs. It was stupid, but anyway.
Mm.
And I said, but I need to change the world. Like there's so much work to do. And she said, your job right now is to be a student. So be a student. The world will wait, like let other folks do this work for right now. And then when you are finished, you will continue this work. But what that did was take me out of those conversations. So like I just never joined those conversations or those networks or those communities in Washington, D.C. I think had I done so, I wouldn't have ever left.
Mm.
Right? I wouldn't have done what I was supposed to do, which was become a professor. Um, because I didn't go to grad school saying I want to be a professor. I didn't know what the fuck a professor was. Like, what the? I had no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Um,
If your
anyway,
parents aren't,
so
yeah, it's like,
whatever. I don't know. Yeah. So I got kind of bad advice. You know, whatever. So I just
Mm.
never joined those networks, and so never got plugged into community in Washington D.C. in a really meaningful way,
Yeah.
um, and so didn't have any problem leaving when it was time to do that. Blah blah blah. Anyway, and
Wow.
so yeah, and so I got here, and um, I've had a lot of therapy, Luna, a
Mm.
lot of therapy. I got here, and it was horrible from basically day one, for all kinds of reasons, mostly having to do with the workplace. Um, and then so and I was terribly homesick, like just and the weather was shite. Like I just
Mm.
Canada, fucking Western Canada, Western right. So it was just a profound disappointment. And so as a consequence, I spent about 5 years in a really bad mood and really just depressed, in a clinical way.
Mm.
Um, and so I think I missed the opportunity to like get plugged in here as well.
Mm.
And so, and plus, going through like, okay, benchmark, 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 play this game, play the game, play the game, play the game. And I was applying for jobs, like literally a year. This is the first year that I've not applied for academic jobs since I got here. Right.
Wow.
So, trying to keep myself publishing, so I could be competitive, while clinically depressed and totally separated from my family. Like I had, I wasn't partnered when I moved here, so I was by myself.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it was a really terrible
That's
time.
so
So
hard.
long, yeah, it was really terrible. And academia is a cruel thing. It does this to us. It completely divorces us from everyone who loves us, and then we get into this new place, right? And nobody gives a shit. Like I remember one day. I mean, I'm gonna answer your question as we go, but I remember one day, like it's so visceral for me. I remember this day I was in the shower, and I thought, oh my god, if I fell and like cut my head open, there's literally no one who would know until I didn't show up for work on Wednesday morning.
God, it's terrifying.
And that was like Saturday, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I literally remember having that thought.
Mm.
Like somebody, my mom and my sister would have, and my dad would have noticed I didn't call, but they would have been like, "Oh, she's busy.
Yeah.
She'll
And
call
you're
us
far
eventually."
away, so they can't just be
And I'm
like,
far away. Yeah, I'm 2,500 miles from where they live.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it was a hard time. So I just never really plugged in here. And it was only after I could get up and breathe from the climb up the tenure track ladder,
Mm.
like when I got promoted to associate, that I was like, all right, I'm gonna write this Stampede book because I want to, and it's like my rage book, and it's gonna be
Mm.
like my thing. But I also started really plugging back in and doing the nonprofit stuff and like figuring out, how can I be of service? Um, and now that I'm full and this book is done, yeah, I'm absolutely just doing stuff for local nonprofit organizations, trainings, workshops. If they need research, I can do that work, like all that stuff. And like I just this morning actually had a meeting with the president of one of the board of directors of a local nonprofit here, and trying to, she wants her board to learn about power and privilege,
Mm.
and how to navigate, like how do you talk to your MLA about harm reduction, that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. Let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff I do, and it counts as service, right? Which is super cool. I don't know if it would at a research one,
Mm.
but it does here.
Yeah.
at like my little mid-sized public university in Western Canada. So yeah, so it's cool, you know, I keep on keeping on. But as you know, like I'm kind of transitioning out, you know, I'm gonna retire at 55, so that's 6 years from now. Like literally over here on my whiteboard, I've got like my partner's like, can we make that an Excel spreadsheet, please? So I've literally got like 6 years mapped out, like what
That's
my
amazing.
teaching load's going to be, and when my next sabbatical is, when I'm eligible for that next, like, because I'm gonna retire like as soon as I can collect my pension, which I won't do because that's um, I won't do. But as soon as I've vested as much as I can at the, you know, because I still have, I think I'm in a union, so I think I have like 3 grid steps left before I max out my salary. And
Mm.
of course, we've never had a cola increase. Literally, the whole time I've been here since 2009, no cola. We only get our grid steps, which are union negotiated. Thank goodness for the
Right.
union.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I kind of feel like why stick around if I'm not going, like if the grid ends, you
Yeah.
know? So I'll just retire and transition out into something else. It's my plan.
Yes. And you're also doing a degree.
Yeah, that's part of the plan. Yeah, so
That's in the Excel
I'm finishing
spreadsheet.
up. It's in the Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, yeah, I'm finishing up an MSW this semester, actually, Master of Social Work. Yep. So I'll finish in May, and I will then go on an externship to hopefully with the agency I'm currently doing my practicum at. So yeah, they let me do psychotherapy, one-on-one psychotherapy with clients these days, which I find
Wow.
I'm just like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not adult enough for that, but apparently I am. Um, so yeah, so that's super cool. So that's kind of probably the direction I'll head. Um, Maybe do some like I really loved. I had this awesome practicum placement that was in the education department of a nonprofit organization in our city here, and I really coveted my supervisor's job. She was like the education manager, and so like I got to. So she oversaw the whole education program, and I was her practicum student. And as part of my placement, I got to research and create um, the slide deck and like all the materials for their training on laws and legislation around Canada's sex industry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like harm reduction stuff. And then I also got to teach, it was called Party and Play at the time, but it was basically about like chemsex and how like folks in certain communities are using psychedelics to enhance sexual pleasure, and doing it like in group settings. And so I got to give this training to the Calgary Police Service.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it
amazing.
was super cool. It was super cool. So they do these really
What
cool
is
things. So I
their
really have covered this
reaction?
whole job.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were. Oh yeah, the Calgary Police Service. I actually did 2 trainings for them. Co-facilitated 2 trainings while I was a practicum student. One was that one, and then the other one was on how not to be an asshole to unhoused people.
Oh, wow.
Um, I mean, it wasn't called that, but that's basically
I
what it
think that
was.
should be called that. That's amazing.
You know. And yeah, so it was just so much fun. I loved the practicum placement so much. It was just the best ever. And the CPS reacted exactly as you might imagine a police service to react, right? Like they were just like, and and honestly, you know, I learned some stuff too. When when I was co-facilitating the presentation around like how not to be an asshole to unhoused folks, um, we really got to hear some stuff around how like the police officers experience vicarious trauma as a consequence of like having to handle all of the overdosing all the time.
Yeah.
um, and like, you know, they're learning how to use naloxone kits and things like that, but you know, in the past just sort of hearing from them about their vicarious trauma, and like, you know, basically they're like, we're not assholes, but like we get complaints from the public about like unhoused folks sleeping in metro stations. Um, you know, and so basically we were sort of having this really lovely back and forth around, not that I'm a friend of police officers, but like
Mhm.
this really interesting back and forth around, well, you know, folks are complaining that they're feeling unsafe in the metro stations, and then they, you know, and like they're like not family atmospheres when you've got folks that are like unhoused and syringes everywhere and all this stuff. And then we would say to them like, okay, but here's the thing, like folks are flocking to the metro stations because it's fucking cold in Calgary,
Yes.
and they need heat, and they want their surveillance cameras because it keeps them safe, right? So it's not an accident that they are where you are, because they know that if something bad happens, that you will be there, that someone will see it on
Mm.
surveillance, or that, you know, whether it's in-person surveillance from the CPS doing patrol, or like literally the cameras in the stations, right? So yeah, it was a really interesting conversation, but yeah, they reacted as you might expect they react.
Well, it's interesting. Before Christmas, I went on like meet the buyers kind of thing, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of people from like local government and the fire service. When I said something about having done training in Latin America for gender-based violence and bystander intervention, he was like, can you do training for us? Because
Yes.
they have certificates that they get like credit. You know what I mean? Like I forget what the
Yeah,
certificate is, like the whatever rose certificate, you know, to show that they have, you know, that they're committed to this, right? And
that's
so they
right.
have to get
Yeah.
training to meet those criteria.
Yes, they
I
do.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's an
That
interesting thing
reminds me.
that you could
It
like
is.
be doing, right? And getting paid for.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I mean, so social workers, nurses, this is something we're not taught
Yeah.
in academia, right? As scholars, social workers, nurses, all these firefighters, police, they have to take Cont Ed, they have to take continuing education. So, like, as a social worker, soon to be, like, in order to maintain my license, I have to take so many X hours of continuing education credits per year, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could teach those.
Yeah.
Like, I want, you know, how do I get on that train?
Yes.
And so, and I think so many of us who do like this critical work in the academy, social justice work in the academy, like we know this stuff really well, and absolutely could be the people that are offering these continuing education credits. Because goodness knows, and this is something I mentioned earlier before the cameras started rolling, goodness knows some of my professors should not be teaching those CEs. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's, I'm like, they let you teach this course? What the
It's
what?
bad. It's so
I
bad.
can't. I can't.
Oh, it's absolutely horrible.
Not
But
all of them, but some of them.
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm also, and maybe we don't have enough time to really go into this, but I mean, are you also thinking of the social work, but also these continuing education and how to, because
Yeah.
your communications, like that's where you started and you understand
Mm-hmm.
how to get people to care. And like you work a lot, you know, you told me you work a lot with white
Gosh.
women who are just like, well, I don't get why I can't say
Yeah.
these things and why can't I just speak my mind, and you know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
with Canada and with the UK going more towards like right, well, all of Europe really going more towards right-wing governments. Like
Mm-hmm.
do we see, are you, or do you have any thoughts about how that affects your job and your retirement and your whole Excel plan and contingency
Mm.
plans around that? And not
I
being
mean, you know,
DEI or EDI or whatever.
yeah. I mean, when I'm not sure that I know how to make people care.
Hmm.
I wish I did. Um, I wish I did. I'm not sure I ever learned that skill. Um, because it was funny. I have a client actually, in my practicum, my one-on-one psychotherapy. They're doing this amazing sort of environmental justice work and trying to make a go of starting a consulting practice. And we were just talking the other day about how we both work on things that we have to convince people are important. So it's like white women don't know that they need me to explain to them how not to be racist assholes. Not that I always get it right, but I mean, you know.
But we do the work.
Keep on keeping on. You know, I hit Sarah Ahmed's brick wall about 97 times a day, but I get back up again. I don't even know. But I mean, it's like I have this professor I have this semester. I had her last semester as well. She's a licensed clinical social worker in Colorado, and she's lovely. She's a doctor as well. She has a PhD. I think she has a PhD. She might have a DSW, which is a doctor in social work.
Oh, wow.
Which is like a more practical degree that I think is a U.S. invention,
Right,
a money
okay.
grab situation. But
Yes.
but I think she has a PhD. I'm not sure. But anyway, she does have a doctorate. And she's she's an adjunct. So, you know, that there's a layer to that as well. And that, you know, we're like off the side of her desk, you know, so she's not paying that close attention to us. But she is progressive, but she's liberal with a small L in the worst kind of way, white cis woman. And she, and I, you know, in 2 semesters, I've had to say, can we talk about what's happening in the U.S.? You know, of course, they're all in the U.S. It's a U.S.-based online degree program. You know, can we talk about like the disaster that is befalling you all?
Yes.
In the context of the code of ethics of our profession.
Man, yes, dude.
Right?
Completely.
Like there is a code of ethics, and we are beat over the damn head with it. But some people miss certain parts of it, like the social justice advocacy part, right? And the self-determination of patients part, and the political advocacy part. You know, I'm like, you can't fucking pick and choose this shit. Like, it's either you like, it's a code of ethics, right? Anyway. And every single time I'm the one that has to bring it up. And her response is, well, you know, there are very lovely people on both sides, and we don't want to blah, 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 to piss the people off. And I was like,
both sides that shit?
I can't. You know, I can't do it, right? Like,
no,
oh my goodness.
God.
And so it was all well and good when it was theoretical back last fall.
Right.
But then the fucking executive orders started dropping, you know, a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, let us turn, please, to page blah, 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 blah of the Code of Ethics and discuss item 6.0, shall we? You know, because if you even come at me with your trans antagonistic crap, I will fucking report you.
Yes. Yes,
Right?
you need to.
Like,
oh my God. I know.
Yeah, it's
I'm so glad they have you on that call. And like, I'm
Oh my
sure
God.
other people are like, I'm so glad I come to this class and Kim's there.
I'm not sure. I maybe not. I
a
don't
couple
know, but,
people probably.
like, honestly. And then my other professor, whom I chose to take this other class with that I have, I chose to switch professors because I didn't like my professor from last semester for this course. And so I'm like, oh, she's a woman of color. She'll know what's up. She'll be awesome. I feel like she's worse because I you know, I don't know. Like I feel like she's worse. She won't even talk about it. Like at least my other professor, this white cis woman, she'll be like, oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Kim. What does everybody think? You know, but like this other woman, she's like, no, those are two, you know, it's so hard to talk about that stuff because people get so heated and I'm like,
yeah, it's getting hot in here. It's really
we are social workers. And not only are we social workers, it is literally your job to teach us how to be social workers.
Yes.
I
Oh,
actually did accuse her of being a bad teacher last week.
did
I
you?
did
To
kind
her
of say that out loud.
face?
I did to her. Yeah, I did say that out loud. It was too bad for her.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I said, that's just bad teaching. Because I
But
just,
you would know. I mean, you're like, I got my credentials.
yeah. I mean, and that's the problem too, right? Is that like they don't know who I am in that
Yeah,
role. You know, they only
yeah.
know me like as, so I sound, I'm sure, like a little bit snotty, but whatever.
You're just hiding it. You're
It's
not
just bad
like,
teaching.
well, actually, as a PhD in
Yeah.
that would be
And
really
again,
annoying.
yeah, this person too, this woman too, is a sessional, an
Mm,
adjunct, and so again, we're off the side of her desk, right? She social workers don't get paid well, and so they have to collect. They have to have another source of income. They have to do this gigs, right?
yeah,
Whether it's like EAP stuff or if it's teach a course, to support, like they
yeah,
have to do it because they get paid like crap,
yeah.
and so we're not their priority. They're not really planning for class. They don't know what they're doing. They never wanted to be teachers. They're just like, yes, I can support the future generation.
It's just like it's above my pay grade, and can I just, you know what I mean? Like, I
Exactly.
didn't sign up for this. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I'm worried about the future, but I think that's why I do a lot of different things. And I think we've had conversations about the difficulty of like tick boxes on
Yeah.
EDI and things like this, that I knew that didn't want to just I didn't want to do EDI as like my only job, not because I wanted to diversify my portfolio, but really because it's like, do I want to really be doing this for organizations that don't give a shit, or for people who,
Exactly.
like, I mean, I even have some issues with like coaching within organizations when, if
Mm-hmm.
they're paying me, how much can I advocate for my client, right? So there's a lot of ethics
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm now learning about that, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
screw the job. Like, if you don't want to pay me again, fine, but I'm advocating for my client regardless, you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
don't care who's
Yeah.
paying me, but I understand that that's like conversations to be had as well. um
Yeah.
so yeah, this has been an amazing conversation because I feel like we've touched on
I don't know. I feel
so
like,
much.
yeah, there might not be any there, but here we are.
Those of you who are stuck around, you're like our rebel, like resistance people. So yeah, we're all for you. Fists in the air and everything, yelling at clouds and everything
Yep.
that
Right
us
on.
older women are getting into now.
Hmm. Or perhaps have always been into, but you and I, having been younger women, didn't see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it is so fascinating. That's sort of how privilege works. Like just yesterday, I was teaching because I have this other class at a speaking of gigs, I have this other class at another university, and my students are learning to be psychiatric nurses, and they're amazing. And so they're working on this project, and one of the women was talking to me about what her project is going to be on, and basically they're doing like mental wellness across the lifespan, and focusing on women as in like postpartum, in the postpartum space, because nobody really does any research there,
Mm-hmm.
or focuses on it or whatever, right? And I was like, that's super cool. And she mentioned one other thing. I think it was like teenage years or something. And I said, oh, and what about menopause? And she's like, oh yeah, I never thought of it. And she said, and I guess I never thought of it because I haven't gone through it yet. And so I didn't think of it. And I said, this is perfect. This is how privilege works,
Yes.
right? And you see, you're not a bad person. You see, you're not intentionally exclusionary, but this is how privilege works. And so you and I, right? I'm sure our elders have been fucking badass, and
Yes.
we just maybe haven't noticed it.
And haven't had the conversation.
and haven't had the conversation.
And
Yeah.
that's why this is so amazing to have with you. So I'm just like all of it. But you do. Oh, so I usually end these with a song. And I was telling you, like, I've got a playlist which is all
Yes.
about like resistance and things like that. Sometimes I just need a
Yeah.
lot of like joy and just like, start moving my ass. So, what's on your playlist like this week, or like what song is really gets you going in the morning, or
Mhm.
yeah, what do you want to share with
Yeah.
us?
I mean, you kind of warned me this question was coming, and so I wrote some things. I'm a little bit of a dork. My admission is that I love musical theater. So many of my things come from musical theater. The most obvious one that folks will know now because of the movie is Defying Gravity from Wicked.
Yeah.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. I mean, I saw Wicked on Broadway in 2003, so that's how long Wicked has been part of my life, and I love Defying Gravity. Um, Also, there's a musical called Ragtime that is based on E.L. Doctorow's novel. So, racial justice stuff, feminist stuff, immigration stuff. And it was a musical. It ran on Broadway in 1998 ish. Such a brilliant show. And
Wow.
I have three songs on my playlist from that musical.
Wow.
So just go and grab the
I need
recording
to,
and
yeah.
you'll hear it. So the three are Let Them Hear You, Back to Before, and Wheels of a Dream. All three from that show, but the whole show is amazing, so brilliant. Um, One I've already given you because you asked for playlists like a long time ago, and so one of them is I'd Rather Be Me from the musical Mean Girls. Brilliant. You can YouTube it. It's awesome. Um, and then of course you got to have your Cyndi Lauper. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, right? And then Bikini Kill, because old
Yes.
school Riot Girl, Bikini Kill,
Absolutely love
suck my left one.
Yes.
Suck it.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Did you listen to the Butchies as well? Were you a Butchies
Oh
fan?
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Whole, Witches, Bikini Kill, like,
Sleater
and honestly,
Kenny.
yeah, all of it. And honestly, it was my sister who was super into it. Cause like I was a Broadway girl and she was into all the punk rock stuff. And so did I identify as a riot girl at the time? No, she did. But I loved that stuff. I just never told her.
Can't tell her.
You can't tell her.
And Team Dresch. I went to see Team Dresch when I was, oh my
Team
God,
Stretch. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
absolutely
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
amazing. I was just in love with all of
Yeah,
them. Those were like my
yeah,
first girl crushes where I was just like,
exactly. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Like everything out of like Olympia, Washington, right? All of the sort of Riot Girl stuff. Oh, brilliant,
Candy ass
brilliant, amazing stuff.
records,
Candy ass
lesbianic records.
records. Yep. And those stickers, the stickers that used to come in the little packages when you order stuff from them. Like my sister still has all that stuff, right? It was, and like I remember going to see Hole in like 1990 something, 5, 6 in Boston and driving up there in a fucking
Oh,
snowstorm.
wow.
Um, and like me and my
I'm
earplugs
jealous.
because I'm, super dorky and highly sensitive. I have to have my earplugs. And my sister made fun of me the whole time. And I was cranky at her because it was like, it's too crowded and it's too loud and it's too, but I loved it. I'm not going to lie. I would never tell her. No.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. Oh, I never did get to see them. Oh, amazing.
It
But
was fun.
I knew about Hole first before I was like, oh, so Courtney Love is dating some guy who is also a
His name
musician.
is like Kurt
Who, Kurt
somebody.
somebody? I don't
Yeah,
know. He's dating like the woman from Hole. I don't know.
exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
important part.
There it is. Oh, anyway.
Oh, thank you so much. And
Oh my gosh, thank you.
where can
Super
people
fun.
find you? Where are you
Oh
at? Are
God.
you in the socials? Are you in real life?
I mean, I'm all the socials. I think I gave you my link tree, so you'll
Okay.
put that up. I got some stuff in the works, but I'm not ready to really be like it's all in the link tree. Some of
Okay.
it's up, some of it's not. Yeah, you can
Okay.
find me. I'm easy to find. I just hang out on the socials. Yeah.
Okay. I'll put it all in the show notes. And thank you
Awesome.
so
Thank you.
much.
Oh my
Ah,
God, it was super fun. Thank you.